UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is expected to address the AU summit tomorrow.
He will highlight the important progress taking place on the continent, notably through the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. He will also call for action to address peace and security threats, the cost of living crisis, as well as the impact of the climate crisis on the continent. These remarks will be webcast live, and we'll be able to share those with you under embargo. While in Addis, the Secretary General is also scheduled to take part in the high-level meetings on the situation in the Sahel, on Libya, as well as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He will also hold a press conference before leaving. On the margins of the summit, the Secretary General is scheduled to hold a number of bilateral meetings, which we will confirm to you as they happen. And he will also, of course, meet with the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki.
Well, for a preview, we're now joined by Gideon Chitanga, who's a research associate at the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. Gideon, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so this year's theme for the ordinary session is the year of the AfCFTA, Acceleration of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement Implementation. Does this give us a clue of what's really high on the agenda at this session?
Yes, this is an intensely crowded AU summit. But as we've heard from the summaries, the statement from President Ramaphosa and the AU Secretary General, I think issues of security in the continent is key. Obviously, it is simultaneously linked to the issues of getting African countries to cooperate in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. There are other issues related to institutional reforms and a range of protocols and statutes that are related to that which should be adopted. But I think that also there is the issue of dealing with the problem of climate change and maybe to go back to the key issues of the political stability and security in Africa, which I think is a major issue that potentially would impact the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. I think the statement by President Ramaphosa was quite firm. The DRC is one of the most challenging conflicts, and it has been recurring for years. At one time, it took the whole of the SADC region into a militarized conflict in different camps in the DRC. And since then, it has taken a form of intermittent inflammation. And the recent militarized conflict shows that there is need, as President Ramaphosa said, to double up the effort of leaders in the continent, and particularly in the East African region, to deal with this problem. I think that there is need to find a political path between Rwanda and the DRC in terms of navigating the mutual problems that exist, partly emanating from the historical, ethnic, and geographic divide from that country, and how they have been exploited over the years, to the point where, in a sense, you feel that the authorities in Rwanda have a feeling that the stability in the DRC presents an existential threat to Rwanda, which I think is not the case. And the thing is the continued exploitation of resources in Rwanda in the DRC by multiple parties, including other African countries. And if those issues are arrested and resolved, we have an opportunity to see, I think, more cooperation from the Eastern region and with the other regions. Then there's mention of the Sahel region and obviously Libya, which has been facing serious instability since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. These also are cases that pose serious problems. The mutation of security challenges and climate change particularly in the Sahel region, poses greater difficulties in terms of not only human rights violations, but obviously access to livelihoods for the citizens of Africa, then the Free States, the African Continental Free Trade Area, is perceived to be a framework that should at least boost internal trade between African countries, more movement of goods, intra-continental movement of goods and people and other services. It is difficult to conceive of such an arrangement as long as there are continued political and militarized which continues to violate the rights of citizens, potential of economic development, and trust between political leaders. Those factors increase the security risks even of doing business and increase the already high cost of doing business between African countries.
So peace and security certainly is one of those areas that if that's not sorted out, much of the other ambitions actually fall away to some degree. What can the African Union do? There are many conflicts on the continent. If I think about northern Mozambique, DRC we've mentioned, South Sudan, we've still got countries that are being led by coup leaders in the military in West African states. The African Union sees all of these things play out, and yet they seem, I'm not sure whether it's powerless or unable to resolve these issues. What can come out of this in terms of peace and security?
I think when we look at our institutions, we can agree that there is some progress that has been made if you look at it in a historical sense from a decade or 2 decades ago. The sense of democracy is quite something that citizens in African countries really appreciate and are keen on. But at the top, there is still that culture of politics of strong men and coups, also a sense of using violence to achieve political goals. And unfortunately, these kinds of crises are not only limited to within African states, but in the case of the DRC and Rwanda, these are 2 neighboring African states which have failed until this point to rule-based international or bilateral relations, and this complicates our relations. I am wondering if there is a shortcut to this process. Part of it is evolutionary in the sense of the current leaders demonstrating commitment as they are doing, but doing more in terms of enforcing resolutions. And I think that in the case of Rwanda and the DRC, African leaders need to say this stops here and convince the international community to back very strong positions in terms of dealing with the intentions and the insecurity on the Rwandan side, and also to convince the DRC establishment to at least make concessions with Rwanda, which will ensure stability in that region. As in the other cases, the conflicts are complex, partly have international drivers, partly regionalized and domestic extremism. And in the case of Libya, I think the first cause of the instability is quite clear. It's just that over time, the instability has become more complex with fragmentation and organized military groups seeking power. So I would suggest that there is need to achieve the first goal, which is stopping the guns. Let's stop these militarized conflicts. The second part is to create a negotiated, inclusive path toward democracy in the sense of addressing those conflicts that are domestic. And if they are interested parties, it is crucial to at least draw their into the different institutions and key players so that their interests can also be negotiated with the rest of the interests. But the African Union has to be clear and take a very strong position to say we are clear on stopping the guns. We are clear on our aspirations towards Agenda 2063. We are also clear on getting the African free trade, the continental free trade area to move forward. The second thing is outside security issues. Obviously, Africa is very fragmented. The boundaries which were framed colonially still make the movement of goods and services difficult between countries, and I think this is a crucial factor. With respect to climate change, I think African countries need to at least come up with their own agreement that is driven by Africans, which can then be presented to the international community and to an extent should be responsive to the diverse intercontinental issues in terms of the usage of coal, the transition to different forms of energy, hydrogen energy, solar energy, hydroelectric energy, which is used by other countries, based on a sequence that resonates with the energy, particularly the fact that a lot of African citizens, before you even talk about the transition, they do not have access to energy, if basic purposes even, before you think of big business. So there is potential to create a sequenced pathway that addresses the shortage while at the same time responding to the need to go towards clean energy.
Gideon, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed. Perhaps we can chat again soon after the summit, an ordinary session, just to get a sense of what has played out. But thanks for your time this evening.